You will be shortly. Yeah. Yes.
Are we on?
The meeting started. Live streaming.
Okay, folks. Hello, I'm Gerald Vernon Jackson. I'm leader of the council here in Portsmouth, and welcome to the first virtual meeting of the Cabinet. The meeting is being broadcast to enable the press and public to view the meeting. We're meeting virtually in response to limitations placed on governance by the COVID-19 pandemic. For the purpose of this meeting, the City Solicitors advised that pursuant to Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this meeting will be run by reference to the model of standing orders as set out in the local government authorities in bracket coronavirus close brackets open brackets flexibility of local authority meetings close brackets regulations 2020 number 392 in brackets the regulations. Please can members and officers turn their microphones off when not speaking. I'm now going to ask people to introduce themselves so that members of the public can know who everybody is. I'm going to do this in 3 sections. First to members of the Cabinet, then to other councillors who are with us, and then to council officers. So, just the ones I can see. Councillor Hugh Mason, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Hugh Mason, Councillor for St Jude Ward, and I hold the portfolio for planning and city regeneration.
Matthew.
I'm Matthew Williamson. I'm the Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care.
Lynn.
I'm Lynn Stagg. I'm Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation, and I'm Ward Councillor for Baffins Ward.
Okay. Dave. You're on mute, Dave.
Dave Ashmore, Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you. Susie.
Susie Horton, I'm the Cabinet Member for
Lee.
Yeah, Councillor Lee Hunt. I'm the ward councillor, one of the ward councillors for Nelson Ward. That covers Tipner, Stamshaw, Buckland and North End. And I am the Cabinet Member with overview for community safety across the city.
Darren.
Hello, I'm Darren Sanders. I'm one of the councillors for Baffins, North Milton and South Cockner, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Housing.
Now, because of this system, I can't see everybody else who's on, but I'm presuming Mr. Pitt, are you here?
I am a leader, Councillor Steve Pitt, Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Economic Development, Deputy Leader of the Council.
Okay, Councillor Tom Wood, are you here? If so, you're very quiet. Okay, I'm sure Joe can tell us when Tom joins us. I know he's intended. Is there any other members of Cabinet that I've forgotten?
Councillor Wood was there earlier, so hopefully he'll be rejoining us.
Excellent. Okay.
My apologies, Leader. My computer threw me out. I am here. I'm Tom Wood. I'm the Cabinet Member for Resources.
Thanks, Tom. Okay. Other councillors who joined us are that I can see. Simon.
Hi, Councillor Simon Bosher. I'm the Conservative spokesman for Traffic and Transportation.
Okay, Cal. Come in, Cal. Okay. And is there any other councillors who are with us today that I haven't called? So
Leader,
Cal,
Leader, you've got Councillor Scott Pater Harris here with me.
Excellent. Is he physically with you, or is he on a different computer, Simon?
No, he's physically with me, socially distancing on the other side of our group room.
Excellent. Excellent. Good. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. And I know
George just joined the call as well.
Oh, George, hello. Good afternoon. Nice to see you. Okay, folks. So the council officers that I can see. Joe.
Yeah, Joanne Wild Smith, Democratic Services, taking the minutes today.
Excellent. Then, who else have I got? I'm sorry, on this system, I can't see who everybody is, so people will need to introduce themselves.
Leader, if you press the participants thing on your bar, then it'll bring up a list on the right hand side of all the
good. Yes, I was trying to
there.
look at the chat thing just in case people wanted to talk. So, who have we got? Andy Biddle.
Good afternoon, Leader. Andy Biddle, Assistant Director for Adult Social Care.
Okay. Colette. Come in, Colette. Are you there?
I am. Colette Hill. I'm the Assistant Director for Neighbourhood Services.
Okay. James Hill.
Good afternoon, Leader members. James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services.
Okay. Paddy.
Good afternoon, Paddy May, Corporate Strategy Manager.
Tristan.
Good afternoon, members. Tristan Samuels, Director of Regeneration.
Okay. Let's have a look. Hayley.
Hello, I'm Hayley Trower. I'm the Air Quality Lead for Transport.
Okay. Chris Ward.
Afternoon, members. Chris Ward, Director of Finance.
David Williams.
Good afternoon, all. David Williams, Chief Executive.
Okay. I've got other people. It says we've been invited from other conversations, and I don't know if they're here. So yell if you are. I've got Peter Balfe, Natasha Edmonds, Sharon George, Alison Jeffrey, Sophie Mallon, Felicity Tidbury, and Pam Turton. Any here? There was silence. Okay. So folks, if people want to speak, if it's possible, I think it's best to do it in the conversation bar. Just to ask to speak there, if that's okay. Because Councillor Cal-Corkery needs to get to work, I'm going to suggest that we reorder the agenda so that that's the first of the things that come up in terms of doing the homelessness piece, a report that Cal wants to talk on. But I'll just go through the first bits, which is apologies for absence. I don't think we've got any. Joe? No. Declarations of interest, colleagues. Any councillors with an interest they want or need to declare? No. Colleagues, when it comes to voting, I'm going to put the suggestion of what the vote should be. If you want to not agree with that, you need to say, but silence I will take as affirmation for the process of today's meeting. Minutes of previous meetings on the 10th of March. Colleagues, anybody got any questions or unhappy with those minutes? No? Okay. Can we then now move, I suppose it's a quick thing. The decision taken by the Chief Exec under Standing Order 58, High Portsmouth information item, that I think is going to full council anyway, but colleagues, anybody unhappy with that? Okay, everybody fine with that? Thank you.
Sorry,
in
Leader,
which case,
sorry to interrupt. That one's not going to council. That would have been a cabinet decision, so the decision's been taken.
All right.
That's just for noting.
Okay. All right. Then we're going to move to then item 12 on the agenda. And for those people trying to follow this online, who are looking through the agenda, that's on page 177 to 220. James, James or Paul, who's going to introduce this?
Paul here, and I'm happy to introduce.
Thanks, Paul.
There are two deputations, I believe, one from Councillor Corkery,
Yep.
and I have one in writing from the PDPLA. Would you like those in advance of the introduction, or would you like the introduction first?
Could you do the introduction first, and then we'll come to those two deputations, if that's all right?
Yeah, of course. Just bear with me 1 second.
Paul, do you want to say who you are?
Yes, of course. Paul Fielding, I'm Assistant Director for Housing within the Council. So I'll introduce the report. The purpose of this complex report, brought at the request of the Cabinet Member for Housing, is to outline the support in place for rough sleepers and those who are street homeless prior to and during the COVID-19 emergency, and the work underway to continue to support those individuals and the direction of travel for the service in the long term. In section 3 of the report, it identifies that the City Council does not currently have statutory responsibilities to provide accommodation to any homeless person that has no entitlement to public funds, does not meet priority criteria for need, or is deemed to have intentionally caused their homelessness, and may be classified as non-priority homeless. Despite this lack of statutory duty to provide accommodation, successive administrations have supported this group with the provision of a day service and, since 2017, an all-year-round night shelter. The city's 2018 rough sleeping street homeless strategy set out the accommodation first, not accommodation only model, and saw the creation of a cross-party, multi-agency partnership group which aims to steer the city's response on this issue. However, it's important to recognise that there are groups that it is required to provide accommodation for, including 150 households currently in temporary accommodation and over 2,000 households on the housing register in varying degree of priority housing need. Section 4 of the report reminds Cabinet of the day and night services, which are funded from a mixture of funding sources, including Rough Sleeping Initiative grant from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. The support around these services came from a number of areas, and this is recognised within the learning document in Appendix 1. The efforts to support non-priority homeless since the start of the COVID-19 crisis is outlined in Section 5. The work of officers, contractors and partner agencies to find, secure and safely operate accommodation at short notice during the early days of lockdown is noted, as is the lack of options available to the City Council in undertaking this task. All of this was under the direction of a temporary hotel management group chaired by the Director of Housing, Neighbourhoods and Building Services, James Hill, and supported by the administration, police, partnership group and council officers from a range of services. Section 6 outlines the learning from working in the hotels over the past 3 months, and of particular note is the fact that individuals need a range of different solutions at this time, ranging from financial support to enter and sustain a tenancy, to, in some instances, intensive support to help them move from a vulnerable lifestyle into one which can maintain a sustainable accommodation. The operation of the 2 Ibis hotels and a small facility in Drayton has not been without its challenges, having accommodated over 200 people, some with a range of highly complex needs. The pace of learning has been rapid, but by working together with various partners, the management group has worked to ensure problems are addressed as best as possible, given the restrictions of lockdown. The desire of the MHCLG to prevent people returning to rough sleeping is outlined in Section 7 of the report. Officers are having weekly conversations with the Ministry, and they have indicated they wish to co-produce the interim and long-term plans with us. They are aware of the timetable to leave the current hotels by the end of August and the cliff edge it creates. Although both revenue and capital funding for local authorities is being made available, at this time the mechanism for funding allocation and timescale has not been confirmed. Section 8 of the report outlines why the emergency accommodation is not sustainable, particularly noting that IBIS have now indicated they wish to return to their core business and want to end the arrangement at the end of the current contract. The report outlines why a return to the previous arrangements would only provide night beds for 18 people, and why a leap to a permanent solution at this time, without the involvement of the partnership group and without understanding of the success of the options, would be likely to fail. This results in the proposal of an interim plan which takes the cohort from the current hotels into a medium-term solution which can be used for up to 12 months. And Section 9 and 10 of the report outline what that interim plan would look like and the resources needed to deliver it, remembering that the Council has statutory duty to provide accommodation to other groups means that options outside of the usual social housing route must be considered. The interim plan is a mixture of solutions, including use of private rented sector, houses of multiple occupancy, and an intensive support block for those who need support on site. The estimated cost of the work over the next year is outlined in Appendix 4, Whilst this cannot be confirmed until full negotiations have been concluded, the figure of 2.5 million for 12 months after the exit from the current hotels is outlined and includes financial support to enter private tenancy, accommodation support, security and staff costs. A major issue to highlight are the comments from the Director of Finance, who states that there remains funding uncertainty and a shortfall while the cost of the plan and the funding is identified. In the event of a funding shortfall does arise, a further report will be required to be considered by Cabinet prior to entering financial commitments. In addition to uncertainty around funding, there is a significant risk around accommodation options may be limited or suitable agreements may not be reached within the short timescales we have. In principle, agreements within the next few days with agreed funding being in place are needed if the timescale of the interim plan is to be achieved. Section 11 of the report outlines how a long-term solution needs the input of the partnership group, and it proposes that this group is involved in the development of the direction of travel and principles around such an offer. I've spoken to other local authorities, including those in London and other cities around the country, and many are in a similar position to Portsmouth, albeit we have some particular challenges surrounding suitable accommodation within the city. And the numerous recommendations of the report are outlined in section 2. And finally, for the record, I would like to take the opportunity to personally thank the team that have worked hard on the challenge for the past 3.5 months, including IBIS, Fort Roche, the police, Society of St James, Two Saints, and a range of volunteer groups and officers across the council. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, Paul, thanks very much indeed. Shall we come next to Councillor Cal Corkery to do your deputation, and then Paul will come back to you for the deputation from the Private Landlords Association. Cal, welcome. The floor and the video are yours.
Thank you very much, Leader. I wanted to start, I guess, by echoing Paul's comments. I'm sure the sentiment will be shared by everyone, to thank everyone that's been involved over the last couple of months in the provision of homelessness services to the most vulnerable in Portsmouth, whether that's been council officers, staff working for the service providers, or the various volunteers that have been supporting the projects, to get around 200 people who've often kind of lived very chaotic and difficult lives off the streets or off the sofas or the insecure housing that they were in and into settled accommodation over the period of lockdown is a significant achievement. I think that needs to be recognised, and kind of everyone that's been involved thanked for their contribution towards that. I wanted to make a few comments on the plan that's being put forward. I think it's absolutely right to recognise that within that group of around 200 people that have been accommodated, there is going to be a range of needs and a range of wishes about how people wish to be accommodated going forward and what their options might be. I want to focus on one particular group within that, and that is the group of people that are often referred to as having multiple and complex needs, and the people that often have kind of been in and out of the system over a very long period, quite often decades, kind of revolving door of homelessness, to hostel, to insecure housing, and quite often back out on the street. So I think that is the group really that we need to focus on if we want to make a significant dent into ending that cycle and helping people stay off the street longer term. I'm particularly interested, and have been for a while, in the model Housing First, which has got quite a lot of prominence in recent years and been shown to work where it has been implemented, I think particularly in North America and Scandinavia. I think Finland is the key example that is always pointed to, where it's often remarked that street homelessness has been almost abolished through the implementation of a Housing First approach to support those people with multiple and complex needs. The key points of Housing First are firstly that you give someone their accommodation without any strings attached, and that housing is secure long term, whether or not they engage with support, whether or not they need support. If people require it, then that support is there on offer, but it is not a requirement of the accommodation, because I think that is sometimes the problem that people experience with the traditional hostel pathway or with the traditional supported housing, is that they struggle to live with the conditions and the requirements of that, and that leads to them then either choosing to leave or being required to leave, because they feel for not being able to adhere to those conditions. The other thing with Housing First, where it's been implemented properly, is that people are housed in a kind of pepper potted way, so they're not concentrated in one particular block or one particular estate. Their accommodation is spread throughout an area, and that's really important in terms of not concentrating people with similar difficult histories in one place. And I think that's another failure sometimes of supported housing and hostels. And I say that as someone that has worked in supported housing and done many a 12-hour shift in hostels. So really, what I'm trying to put forward here is kind of support for what has already happened, so support for the efforts to try and find a longer term solution. But I'd also really want to plug the approach of Housing First as the way forward, particularly for those with the complex and multiple needs. Now, Housing First is a resource intensive process, because you're giving someone a secure tenancy. You're also providing support intensively if they need it and if they require it. It's obviously not going to come cheap, but I do think that we've got an opportunity here where government has pledged hundreds of millions of pounds to support these around 15,000 people that have been housed across the country. We've got a significant chunk of those 15,000, around 200 here in Portsmouth. So I really think that we should be making the case for kind of significant resources to be pledged that will allow us to put people in accommodation long term that's going to resolve the cycle of homelessness and not just result in them being back out on the street before too long. And I think one of the main things that people have noticed over the course of the crisis is that for a long time we were told that homelessness is inevitable, that there will always be significant numbers of people on the street, that people have been offered help but they've turned it down. And I think what the hotel provision has shown, actually, in large part, that is false. When people have been given the opportunity to get off the street, get out of the secure or unsafe housing that we're in, and offered decent self-contained accommodation, significant numbers of people have taken it up. So thanks for the opportunity to speak. Like I say, I'm very supportive of the efforts that have been made so far, and I hope the administration is radical and bold in its ambition to try and resolve the cycle of homelessness long term. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Cal. It's a very useful contribution. One of the issues we're going to have is that the government have not come up with the money that we all thought they were going to come up with. So we're currently facing a £20 million COVID black hole in the council's finances. That's going to mean we're going to need to do quite a lot of work as a council to identify how we're going to be able to find the money to fund what's already happened, let alone what we might want to do in the future. And we're working on that as we speak. Paul, can I come back to you now for the deputation from the Private Landlords Association?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. So this is a deputation from Martin Silman, who is the chair of the Portsmouth and District Private Landlords Association, and so I'll read that through verbatim. The Portsmouth and District Private Landlords Association commend the work that has been done over the past months to house rough sleepers, and we are keen to continue to support efforts in this area with the aim of ending the problem once and for all. We are pleased to see the segmentation of current homeless persons into 3 groups, but we continue to stress the danger of inappropriate placement of tenants into the private rented sector. We do question the cost of the accommodation offered by the Houses of Multiple Occupancy organisation and believe that more cost-effective options exist which will offer longer-term solutions, for example, longer-term leases rather than one-year contracts. We also suggest that some individuals whom the City Council think could be accommodated in houses of multiple occupancy may be better suited to sharing smaller units. We have made some suggestions as to how private rented sector supply could be increased to the officer team, but we must stress to Cabinet that support for tenants and landlords has to be for the whole duration of the tenancy. Government assistance to overcome some of the barriers in the long term is essential, yet some of the proposals need clarification and enhancement if MHCLG are to allocate funding. We will be happy to continue to work with all parties to help clarify these aspects. Most importantly, we think research needs to be carried out as to the fundamental causes of people becoming homeless. Without a full understanding of the causes, the fundamental problems cannot be addressed. And that ends their deputation.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. I've got two people who indicated they want to speak, Councillor Darren Sanders and Councillor Matthew Winnington. But Joe, can I just for the record, 3 members have said that Teams has thrown them out during the course of this meeting. 2 members of Cabinet, which is Tom and Darren, and also Cal says he's been Teams has thrown him out as well. Can we look to see if we can get IT to make this a more robust system? Because throwing people out in the middle of meetings is not where we need to be. So, Darren.
Thank you, Leader. I want to start with Cal's deputation. I'm firstly delighted that he seems to be rowing back from some of the points attributed to him in the news, particularly around the use of the private rented sector. I'm encouraged by that, as I was discouraged by what was attributed to him in the news. We do have to look at all sectors. We cannot put political ideology before people. I was concerned that was a point Cal had raised in the news, but I'm delighted he hasn't raised it today. So I'm assuming he's rowed back and we can continue with the political consensus that we're going to need going forwards. I want to return to the landlord's deputation comments, basically because I agree with the vast majority of them, because I think that is, but I want to do that properly. But I want to start with the context and why I've asked for this report to come here. This city, it's really very simple. This city has a once-in-a-lifetime chance to put the future of some of the most vulnerable people in our city first, and to actually get people off the streets and off the sofas. Government is finally serious about providing the resources to make it happen. That's why it's told this council it wants to co-produce our future plan with us. That seems to be a change from the usual command and control. And I welcome it, because that's the only way we're going to go forwards. As Cal has said, we've come a very long way in a very short time. If you had said at the start of the year we would get 90% of Portsmouth's rough sleepers and sofa surfers into self-contained accommodation, you would have been laughed at. Yet thanks to the hard work of many people, council officers, volunteers, the police and staff at the 2 Ibis hotels that we've been overseeing for the last few months, we've done just that. And on behalf of the city, I'm grateful and proud of you all. Now, we know there have been problems, but in looking to the future, we must and we will learn from those and deliver something better. I, for one, for instance, don't see You House or Hope House as a sustainable place for the homeless in the long term. I think self-contained accommodation is much better. I want to come back to Cal's point about housing first, because our aim is really simple. It is housing or accommodation first, but not housing or accommodation only. I've looked at some of the detailed collations of research across Europe about the Housing First project. One of the interesting things about it is that it divorces housing from treatment, but it does not divorce housing from support. So, for instance, in Brighton and Hove, Housing First doesn't apply to every single rough sleeper. It applies quite rightly to those people with complex mental health needs. And that's right, and that's good, and that's a proper decision. And that's absolutely crucial, because one of the things we've learnt from looking at more than 200 assessments of sofa surfers and rough sleepers who are currently in our hotels is that many of them need support, but they need different types of support. Perhaps they need some financial support to get back on their feet. Perhaps they need some limited social support to actually try and make them feel better, to try and actually make them feel confident. Perhaps they need the chance of a job. Perhaps they need the chance of learning. Some will need very detailed and very comprehensive support as well. And that's why it's important not to grab people as a group, but to treat them as individuals. And that is something that we are very, very keen to do. However, we are ambitious for our city. As I said, I wanted this report to come here because I wanted the city to know the sort of things that we wanted to do and the sort of offers we wanted to make to government. Our role is simple. We want to stop homelessness now and prevent it in future. Simple as that. And we want government to step up as well. And that's why the landlord's deputation is quite interesting, because I think this administration, and I hope the whole council, is also worried about the distinct prospect of funding the current 200 people that we've got, and government not really thinking about preventing homelessness in future or dealing with people who will sleep rough in 6 months, 9 months or a year. We can't keep everybody in now only to have the same questions facing us in 3, 4, 5 years' time. And that's why we want government to change, to make it easy. That's why in this plan, we want government to change the benefit rules to make it easier for the homeless to get a place. We want to make sure that it deals with the prevention of homelessness, not just the people who exist now. We do not want to ask the same questions or want the same answers in a few years, and I'm delighted that the landlords don't either. But it does mean government stepping up and honouring the promises it has made to us. It has promised to us that we would see the plan, the prospectus, that we want to bid, not just to deal with the rough sleepers and sofa surfers over the next year, but also so that we can build the homes, many of which will house them over the next few years. They promised it a month ago. They promised it to me 2 weeks ago. And we're still waiting. We want to see it because we want to make sure that we can bid for the money, get the money, and produce the plan for the future. But I'm concerned now that the delay that is happening will reduce our abilities to do that. I don't want that to happen, and that's why I want government to step up and be as ambitious for this city as we are. We know where we're going. We've got a cross-party, multi-agency group that will help us get there, and we want to make sure that we can get there and we will get there, but they have to be as ambitious for us. This report is ambitious, but it is also realistic. We do want to change the lives of some of the most vulnerable people in our society for good and forever. We also know we can't get there in a few months. We know the council doesn't have all the answers, so that's why we in this plan will reach out to others to help. But this council and this city does want to change the lives of some of the most vulnerable in our city for good. We want that to happen not just now, but long into the future. This is the first down payment on the kinder, fairer and greener Portsmouth this administration wants to see. Now all we need is government to honour its promises, back us and deliver that brighter future. I think it will, I hope it will, and for the sake of the homeless in our city, it has to. I commend this report, Leader.
Thanks very much. Darren Matthew.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Darren, for his passionate speech on this, which I think really does put down the marker that we need to have as a ambitious and radical city when it comes to this. I'd like to particularly touch on the aspects of this report and really expand on it a bit more in terms of the health and well-being of homeless people. For people who have been street homeless, health and well-being is extremely difficult. It has extremely bad impacts on people's health and well-being, and so often the needs of people and their health and well-being who are on the streets just don't get met at all. So one thing we've been doing as an administration and as public health within that administration is having interventions with people in the IBIS hotels and making a real impact by screening them, by supporting them to get the healthcare that they need, and to address needs that have not been met or addressed by the wider health and care system over, in some cases, decades, and certainly in many cases, years. So this model that we've got looking forwards really is an opportunity for us to completely change the way that we do things, completely change the way that we support people who have been marginalised from society, who have been in many ways shunned by society, and for many cases through no fault of their own, who have just ended up in a really, really poor situation. So the way ahead here, I really commend. I think it is it's going to improve people's well-being. It works in conjunction with our already existing homeless healthcare that we had funding that is ongoing, and we have funding for from Public Health England. It means we're working within the Health and Wellbeing Board, where this strategy will also go. So not only the homeless group, the cross-party homeless group, but this also goes to the even wider group of Health and Wellbeing Boards, where we're looking at all those organisations who are involved with that, whether it be through to the university, through to the fire service, through to the GPs, surgeries in the city, and many, many other, and the schools as well, because we have to remember that people can come from any background in any situation and find themselves homeless, and also people from all organisations in the city have interaction with street homeless people. So if we can try and stop street homelessness, that is our key. But most importantly, it's about looking at every single person as an individual and looking at what their needs are, not a blanket approach, an individual approach, and an approach that looks after their health and well-being and their wider self in the way that they can live lives which can be positive and they can be built for the future to make the very best of their lives. And we as a community owe that to them. So I really also commend this report, and I thank both of the deputations and also to Paul and the rest of the housing team for putting this together.
Okay, colleagues, thank you very much indeed. I haven't got anybody else who's indicated they want to speak. Colleagues, there are 12 recommendations in this report. If anybody has any of these that they don't support, can you please say now? Or okay, I don't hear anything. Therefore, that report is passed with all 12 recommendations. Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, we redid the order of the agenda because Councillor Cal Corkery needs to get off to get to work. But I'd just like to do a quick statement, if it's okay, before we go through the rest of the agenda in the order that it's published. So this is, I just want to make a quick statement about the Black Lives Matter movement. And we've got a full council next week, and I'm sure that all groups will be keen to take the opportunity to speak on the Black Lives Matter movement. And because of the lockdown and the coronavirus, this is the first cabinet meeting since May, and I wanted to say something just at the beginning before we go on. The killing of George Floyd in America on 25th of May 2020 has sparked global protests against racism and discrimination across the world. This administration states its solidarity with those who stand against racism and discrimination in all its forms, and showed this support by lighting the Spinnaker Tower purple for a week from Sunday the 14th of June. We've also written to all staff in the council and issued a public statement. This administration is committed to eradicating racism, discrimination and structural inequality in Portsmouth, and stands in solidarity with Black, Asian and minority ethnic people in Britain, the US and around the world. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, so if we now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the modern slavery statement, which we have to do and is then passed on to full council. Lisa Wills, I think, is here to introduce this. Lisa.
Hi, hello everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm going to try and whiz through this. That was a very long item, and so I'm going to be a bit briefer. This is the second statement that the council have published. Not all local authorities have actually published a statement. It's a bit late this year due to the current circumstances, but it is the second one that we've done. Modern slavery, for those of you, I'm sure you all aware, includes domestic servitude, labour exploitation, sexual and criminal exploitation. And the covering report that we've provided here gives some background and information and local context to the publication of this statement. I'm not going to go through the whole report or the statement, but just a couple of points to pick up. I think Portsmouth City Council is an active member of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Modern Slavery Partnership. It's really important working in partnership on hidden and underreported crimes so that we get the best information that we can locally. The partnership was set up in 2018 by the Police and Crime Commissioner, but has been recently restructured and now is supported jointly by the Police and the Police and Crime Commissioner, which has provided some extra resources and focus, which will really help to develop a better understanding locally of the prevalence and provides a collaborative forum for officers and partners to work in. As you'll see from Appendix 3 to the report, the national analysis from the Modern Slavery and Exploitation Helpline finds that the UK is in the top 3 nationalities when it comes to potential victims, which is a really stark bit of an eye-opener. And we're working with Hampshire Police to improve the focus on improve the local data that's available through one of the partnership subgroups. Very topical, actually, this on the base COVID-19 seems to be exposing potential victims of modern slavery in Leicester. The BBC reported on the 10th, I think, of July, a whistleblower saying that the factory they were working in Leicester had doubled the number of workers to cope with the online demand, and that there'd been no social distancing in the factory. And I think the National Crime Agency has confirmed that it's currently investigating Leicester's textile industry over allegations of exploitation. And I also heard the new Anti-Slavery Commissioner, Dame Sarah Thornton, who used to be the Chief Constable at Thames Valley, also commenting on the importance of supply chains and making sure that our supply chains are clean. Portsmouth Council staff are also working with the training subgroup of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Partnership to develop some consistent Hampshire-wide training offers in e-learning and face-to-face training. And locally, I took a report to the directors board at the beginning of June, and we're going to be extending the number of staff that are trained to spot the signs and refer victims into the right support mechanism. That's really it. I mean, we've made some progress this year. There's more to do, and the things that we're focusing on next year are set out in item 5 on the report, item 10 in the statement itself, which details the work that we're going to do. And that work will be coordinated and monitored by a local steering group that's been set up, which has reps from all the relevant directorates. So, happy to take questions.
Okay, Councillor Lee Hunt, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the report, if that's okay, Leader. Okay, so can everybody hear me okay? Good. So, very grateful to Lisa for this comprehensive report and the attached statement, which I hope everybody reads, and also the diagram which shows clearly what the problem that modern slavery is. It robs people of their self-esteem. I've had first-hand knowledge and experience of it. Albanian man, I described to Lisa earlier on, and we have to note too that it's people from Eastern Europe, mostly Romanians. We have a substantial Romanian population in our city, but Poles and Albanians. And one Albanian man that I knew had been employed by a local shopkeeper, killed himself. He was only given food. He was kept in a cold basement. He hanged himself from a beam in this basement, as it was his living accommodation, no heat, and what little money he was given, he was sending back to his children. And to make sure that he actually killed himself, because his life was so awful and he was so depressed, he also exposed the mains in the house and grabbed hold of them as he hanged himself. And this is the result of modern day slavery. It's very cruel, and I find it's a harrowing subject to consider. Having said all of that, if you read the report, you can see that Portsmouth is taking it on. There's a lot of work going on, and there's more that's going to be done. So although the government looks at businesses more than 36 million, if you read through the report, you can be comforted to see that even with our limited resources, a lot of work goes on in partnership with the police, the fire officers, and with other partners, including the council itself. So it's something we all need to look out for. It's something we all need to report if we see it or we suspect that it's happening. And I hope that if you've read through the report, I'm sure many of you have, you'll see that a lot more is going to be done. And as just to tease out a little bit that Lisa said, and I say I'm grateful for the report, we'll be raising awareness of modern slavery by developing improved internal and external communications. This is at the bottom of the statement that has been written. Extending current training to more staff, and I think that's really important, and ensuring supply chains are free from modern slavery, and that work is ongoing right now, as I understand. And lastly, we'll work with those partners to prevent and detect modern slavery. So it's an important statement, and it's one that we should all want to support. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, Councillor Hugh Mason.
Thank you, Leader. The current edition of the Anti-Slavery Reporter states that in the last recorded year, the police recorded over 5,000 modern slavery offences in this country. But that is only the tip of the iceberg. It is what the police actually saw and was brought to their attention. There is far more slavery in this city as well as in this country than ever comes to the police's attention. And I think the important thing in the report which we have before us is that it emphasizes the need to raise awareness. And I think this is something which all of us, not just as officers, but also as the elected councillors, need to do. We need to raise the awareness of modern slavery in our communities because we have all seen bits of it. And having seen bits of it, we sometimes think this is just us. But it is across the whole of this city, across the whole of this country. And it is a scourge which we need to deal with. And we need to raise awareness. We need to train people to see what the signs are. We need to look at supply chains. And we need to introduce community safety measures. But above all, we need to raise awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hugh Mason. I've got nobody else who's indicated they wish to speak. So I'm going to go to the recommendations. We have 3 recommendations to this report. Colleagues, if there's anybody who is not happy with these any of these 3 recommendations, please can you say now? No? Okay, then I'll take that as having been passed. Is everybody okay with that? Thank you. Okay, let's move on to Lisa. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on to item 6, the LGBT+ champion appointment. And there isn't a report on this, nor is there anybody to introduce it. So I'm going to read what's in the agenda here. At the full council meeting on the 15th of November 2019, a motion on inclusive relationship education was presented by Councillor Susie Horton and passed by full council. This motion included a resolution to ask Cabinet to appoint an elected member, LGBT+ children and young people's champions. Details of the duties of this role is attached. The champion's role was open to all members as outlined in the members' information service item that went out on the 7th of February. Expressions of interest were received from 4 councillors: Councillor Susie Horton, Councillor Chris Atwell, Councillor Claire Udy, and Councillor George Fielding. The members of the councillors met with young people from the 4U group, Portsmouth Pride Youth Society, and the Milton Cross School Diversity Group on the 28th of February. Unfortunately, Councillor Fielding was unable to attend. Each member gave a short introduction to themselves. It was followed by informal discussions with the young people in small groups, and then some well-considered questions were posed from the floor to each of the members in turn. The young people were really impressed by all the members, and there was some debate about whether they could do the job jointly or whether it's more important to have one named overall champion. The young people gave a very clear message that they welcomed the support of all those who'd expressed an interest. They wanted all of these councillors to work together to champion LGBT young people, but a majority selected Councillor Claire Udy as their overall champion. This item is to seek endorsement of the Cabinet in accepting the choice of the young people who were present. This was due to be considered by Cabinet at the Council meeting on the 26th of March 2020, when the COVID restrictions were in. So, colleagues, the question before us is, do we endorse the selection that young people made of a champion for LGBT plus young people's rights, or do we want to go down a different route? I'm happy to propose that we accept the choice the young people made, and I know Councillor Susie Horton would like to speak.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to highlight a few points. Some of them you've covered in there, but just to go back to why this is in front of us now is that there was a notice of motion that came through, which is actually talking about the school curriculum and around the teaching of relationships. And the reason I took that motion forward is because I want young people to be in school learning about things that reflect their lives. So it's not the teaching of something, it's about, does the curriculum reflect their lived reality? And that's why the motion came forward. And I see our role is about trying through school and through other means is actually enabling children and young people in this city to become the best versions of themselves, and we have a responsibility to help them do that. And part of that is about wanting them to know where they can go for support. And schools play a big role in this, but it's not the only place. They get support from groups, they get support from charities, as well as general social media. So the idea of a champion was actually about them having their champion, not us as a cabinet choosing a champion for them. And I really think this whole thing about children's voice and respecting what they say is really at the heart of this. That's why we had quite a lengthy, in a way, it was like a hustings. It was like a political hustings. It was a meeting of many hours long with quite some real grilling from young people, from that wide range of groups. And their decision on the one hand was, can we have all of you? But actually, on balance, I think it was really important for them to learn that actually sometimes you do genuinely have to vote and make a choice. And the person that they chose was somebody who they felt had campaigned already on their behalf. And we all know that Councillor Udy, for example, got the trans flag to be raised outside the City Council, and has actually done a lot of work in championing the rights of LGBTQ, and that's what the young people chose. I'm really keen to carry on working with her. I'm sure the other councillors are too, who put their names forward. And so I think this is really about endorsing a decision that young people in our city have made for themselves.
Okay, colleagues, thanks very much indeed. I see from the chat bar that Councillor Claire Udy has joined the meeting. Claire, if you're there, would you like to say a word?
Can you hear me? Hello, I've had to put a headset on my phone and the kids play Fortnite, so I'm going to walk out of the front room. Hello. I only caught the end of Susie's chat and I've just joined to say hello. It's been quite a long 4 months, hasn't it? And I'm really keen to get involved. And I guess that a lot of the work won't start again until September. Please support me as your champion, and I will carry on championing the rights of LGBTQ teenagers.
Okay.
And young people. Cool.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire.
That's all right.
Colleagues, I'm happy to propose that we support the choice the young people in the city made as Councillor Claire Udy. Is there anybody who is unhappy with that? No. Okay, then that's agreed. Okay, let's move on to item 7, which is the outside appointments. Colleagues, this starts on page 47 of the agenda. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I'm just going to go to the bits where we need to make a decision. So whether we've got more people or trying to do a particular role than we have places for, or we're swapping people around. So the first one is the Elementary Education Act Trust, where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people going for 4 spaces, which is Susie Horton, Hugh Mason, Rob Wood, Gerald Vernon Jackson, Terry Norton, and Matthew Atkins. My understanding is that as Rob Wood is Lord Mayor, he had stepped down from this role, and therefore, and Joe is nodding for that. And Susie, who is your opposite number from the Conservative group? Is it Matthew or Terry? So,
Terry, sorry, I was just unmuting.
Okay, so the logic would seem if with the Conservative spokesman, the logic is to have their education spokesman there.
The only thing is you don't need it doesn't have to be an education thing, because it's not all about the education. Yeah. But anyway, I see what you mean. But I think Terry was on it anyway. Okay,
so can I propose Susie Horton, Hugh Mason, Terry Norton, and Gerald Vernon Jackson? Anybody? Sorry?
Joe has a hand up, leader.
Joe? Joe, you're on mute. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think that all we needed is a swap for you for Councillor Wood on that one. There are enough places that we don't have to take anyone else off if Councillor Wood wants to be replaced.
Okay, it says in your paperwork here that there has to be 4. But are you happy for 4 to be 5?
Yes, I think the trustees.
Excellent.
That's what happened previously, and Councillor Mason's the chair of that one, so and he's nodding as well.
Excellent. So the paperwork is wrong. It's not 4, it's 5, or it may be just the arithmetic is not correct. So then it is both Terry Norton and Matthew Atkins as well. Is everybody happy with that? Okay. Next one is the King's Theatre Trust, and we get 2 spaces on that. It's currently Councillor Hugh Mason and Councillor Luke Stubbs, but the Conservative group, it says here in the paperwork, are wanting to put Councillor Linda Symes on there instead of Councillor Luke Stubbs. I'm conscious that Councillor Linda Symes is no longer a member of the Conservative group because she's been suspended, as I understand it, for concerns around potentially racist tweets. We've got, I think, Conservative councillors here. Can I confirm with them that even though Councillor Linda Symes is not currently a member of their group, that this is their nomination? Simon, you're indicating yes, that's so. Okay. Colleagues, on that basis, are you happy to have Councillor Symes in instead of Councillor Luke Stubbs? Okay.
Leader.
Oh, sorry.
Leader, it's Steve. It's Steve, Leader. No, I object, Leader. I object, Leader.
Okay. Can you say on what basis?
Yeah, until that situation is resolved, I don't think that we should be appointing someone to an outside body which is a charitable trust. So once it is resolved, then I'm very happy to review that situation. But right now, I just don't feel that that's appropriate or fair to the King's Theatre.
Happy to second that, Leader.
Okay, so your suggestion is that we leave Luke Stubbs on whilst the situation is resolved, to look for a resolution then and then come back to it?
Yes, very happy to do that.
Okay. Simon, are you okay with that? Is that a yes? I think it is. You're still on mute, Simon, but I'm taking your nodding and smiling and generally looking to be positive. Yeah, oh, and I got a thumbs up. Okay, great. Okay, so we'll leave Councillor Luke Stubbs on for the moment, and then when the situation with Councillor Linda Symes is resolved, we will come back to that. Okay, then the Mary Rose Trust. The Lord Mayor is on this twice, both as a real person and as Lord Mayor. So I'm suggesting that I go on instead of Rob for one of those roles, and I am not Lord Mayor, so I have to go on as a real person. Colleagues, are you okay with that? Okay. The Portchester Crematorium Joint Committee, Councillor Steve Pitt and Jeanette Smith, to be replaced by Councillor Lee Hunt and Councillor Dave Ashmore. These has to be cabinet members. Colleagues, are you okay with that? Thank you. Moving on to page 48, there are three things where Councillor Mason is going to go on in his role as cabinet member for planning, strategy, etc. One of them is the Building Control Partnership to replace Councillor Pitt. The Hampshire, no, which one is it? No, the Minerals and Waste Development Framework Members Steering Group to replace me, and the Solent Forum to replace Ben Dowling. Colleagues, are you happy with all of those? Okay, thank you very much indeed. We then get to the issue of champions. Now,
Gerald.
Yep, sorry.
Gerald, looking at the documentation, I think there's one that's been missed out, which I think is motivate. I don't know if Joanne Wildsmith is happy to comment on that, but that looked like one to me, but my eyesight may be poor.
Joe, where are we with motivate? Where is it, Daz?
Joe, you're on mute.
Page 1, but as I said, my eyesight may be poor.
Yes, top of page 1. It was Councillor Pitt, and you've nominated Councillor Mason.
Sorry, yes, my apologies. Thank you very much for spotting that, Darren. So that's the other thing, that Councillor Hugh Mason goes on to that instead of Councillor Pitt. I also notice that there is a vacancy on the fostering panel. Colleagues, can I ask you to talk to your groups? It's an incredibly important role here, because this is about approving or not approving people as foster parents, and that's incredibly important role in terms of making sure young people have an appropriate place to live if they're unable to live with their parents or extended family. So we don't have a nomination at the moment, but if anybody would like to do this, I'd be very grateful to have a nomination from any group who would like to go forward and do this. So, George, if you could ask your group, Claire, if you could ask your group, Simon, if you could ask your group, and Darren, if you could ask your group of anybody who would take this role on, because it's one of the most important roles in the council. Is that all right? Okay, Simon, are you nodding? You frozen. Okay. Then moving on to the issue of champions. And Joe, thank you, Simon. Joe, I think it would be useful to have a short report about what things champions have done over the past, just to look to see about that role for the future. But just going through them, Councillor Tom Coles wants to be appointed an additional Armed Forces champion. My understanding is that if we're to retain our gold award as Armed Forces champion employers, then the Armed Forces champion has to be a member of the Cabinet, and I'm happy to carry on with that. I'm very grateful that Councillor Frank Jonas has supported me in that role, and I'm happy for Tom Coles to also support that role. But I think we can only have one person who is the official champion, and without losing our role as a gold employer. So that would be my proposal there. We've got Matthew Winnington wanting to do the mental health champion, and that seems sensible as the portfolio holder. Darren Sanders to be appointed the homelessness champion, but Darren, I think you're going to change the name of your portfolio to bring to make sure that homelessness is reflected in that. Darren, do you want to say a word on that?
Yes, I mean, I think it actually flows from what both Cal and Martin said earlier on. And I think one of the things we've got to do is not just keep everybody in, but also prevent homelessness as well. And after talking to other councils across the country, it seems quite sensible, if we're going to do that, that my job title is changed to become Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness. because I think prevention is the most important thing. If colleagues are happy, I'm suggesting that.
Okay, colleagues, I think that's a sensible thing to be doing, and I'm happy to endorse that. Everybody else seems to be okay with that as well. So that change to portfolio name is happening. On the Heritage Champions, we've got both Luke Stubbs and Lee Hunt. I'm going to suggest we ask Lee to do this for the minute, but I want to come back to look at this role as part of the report, which I hope Joe will bring to the next meeting of Cabinet, because I think we need to look to see what roles we've had. And in the same way, we've asked for nominations for champions for the third sector and city of service. We've not had any nominations for that, so those remain open. But again, I think as part of that overall report, I want to look to see what effectiveness there has been from the role of champions. Colleagues, are you happy with that? Okay. Moving on to item 8. Before I ask Andy Biddle to come in, I just thought it would be right for us to record the thanks from the City Council and all of the City to everybody who's worked both in the care sector and in the NHS to look after people during this crisis. I think everybody thought that there'd be a very big hit on the NHS and prepared incredibly well for that. I personally don't think that as a nation we understood or prepared in terms of the work for the care sector, both within the council and in the private and voluntary sector, and there's been very significant problems in that area. But I'd like to record our thanks to everybody who's worked in the health and social care sector, in all the homes, whoever's run them, and both Matthew Winnington as portfolio holder and myself wrote to every single care home, every single domiciliary care provider, and sent the staff flowers to say thank you to them 6 weeks ago in the middle of the crisis. And I know that was very, very warmly received by groups of staff. So, Andy, if you'd like to introduce the report.
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, members. So this is a report relating to Harry Sotnick House and a discharge to assess unit. I'll take you through in summary. So the purpose is to update Cabinet on the response by adult services to various guidance that's been issued by government during the corona pandemic, to give you an indication of how we would intend to respond to the potential of a second peak, and to seek endorsement from Cabinet to continue exploring options for future post-COVID use of the unit at Harry Sotnick House. So in terms of the context, we saw an effort to enable the NHS to cope with the anticipated peak of coronavirus, and that was to enable beds to be made available in acute hospitals, both for those people that needed oxygen therapy and those people that may need a ventilator, anticipating a much higher peak than we saw certainly in the southeast. That involved adult social care in working as part of Health and Care Portsmouth with independent providers and with health service colleagues to ensure that hospital beds were available, and that was achieved in large part by discharge from hospital in line with government guidance, which was changed to on the 19th of March to oblige people to be discharged within 3 hours from hospital. We then saw further guidance issued on the 2nd of April of this year, talking about the need for all care homes to make every bed space available, and emphasising the importance of care homes in participating in the national effort to enable the NHS to cope with the peak. And then moving on to page 52, what we did was, in response to those two pieces of guidance, was make some initial beds available in Harry Sotnick Hospital discharge to help with that effort. We then saw the Adult Social Care Action Plan published on the 16th April, and that made it clear that the government expected local authorities with social services responsibilities to identify a place where people could go post-discharge from acute hospital for up to 14 days, where they couldn't go back to their own care home or move into a long-term placement in a care home. That was based on people not being able to be cared for in isolation and the risk of infection therefore spreading further in care homes. We considered options in the city and arrived at the Gun Wharf unit in Harry Sotnick. The building lent itself to being able to provide care not only in isolation in people's rooms, but also being able to put in place a unit that could be separate unit in terms of its entrance, its staffing, its catering, and thereby prevent the spread of infection in the home for people that needed to be discharged from hospital. The other part of the Harry Sotnick use on the second floor would be to enable a further 26 beds to be made available in the event of a second peak of coronavirus, should they be needed. It's very difficult to understand at the moment what the impact will be. We've seen various press reports recently, and we also know that locally the Locality Resilience Forum is modelling a reasonable worst case scenario, but that would be one of the main contributions for adult social care, would be to make those beds available. And then finally, in context, we had an ambition to excuse me, make a discharge to assess unit available in the longer term, so that people wouldn't need to make a decision from a hospital bed. They could leave hospital in a timely way, and that was discussed with Cabinet and approved of on the 4th of February this year. So the recommendations of this report is to endorse the continued operation of the isolation unit that we've got working at Harry Sotnick House, to endorse the expansion of the unit by a further 26 beds should they be needed. Both of those are dependent on funding allocated to the NHS for COVID-19 response. And then finally, to endorse continued work to develop plans post-COVID for a longer term option at Harry Sotnick. We would need to bring back a more detailed financial appraisal to Cabinet to help us understand how that could be funded. It's obviously not a small thing, setting up a separate unit, but the intention would be, as it has been all along really, to enable people to come out of hospital in a timely way, to receive therapy and support in a care home environment rather than a hospital environment, and then to make decisions as to where they would then went on to from there. Most of them would return home with support, but some would need to go on to further care home support. Moving on into page 53, outlined there that the vision around a discharge to assess unit, and the demand that we feel there is currently for people who are medically fit to discharge to come from QA and to make use of that discharge to assess unit. There would also be the option to use beds for what we call a stand-up service, i.e. if people are in the community and needed a short period of care and support but were at risk of going into hospital, then we could look to use Harry Sotnick for that as well in the long term. Because we know that once people go into hospital, if they're older people with multiple morbidities, they can often face deterioration. Moving forward into page 54, there's further demand measures there to show how we've used the facility in the city up to this point and the difference it's made on the numbers of people needing support and waiting for support. And then moving further into page 54, there's a table showing the costs of that D2A unit projected, although we'd need to, as I say, come back with a more detailed financial appraisal to be clear about what the costs were and how they were being met. So the paragraph at the base of page 54 then goes on to talk about where we believe we may be able to allocate those costs, which would be in winter pressures funding that's granted every year, both to the NHS and to the local authority. We currently use that to the maximum. We fund a lot of schemes in response to winter pressures in acute hospitals. And what we need to do is do an analysis of those schemes that we currently have, and we've embarked upon that, to ensure that whether they were all still needed or whether we could divert some of those monies to be able to fund a discharge to assess unit. Moving on to page 55, we then come on to the finance comments, which in summary are talking about where we've come from, where we want to go to, and bringing back a more detailed financial options appraisal to Cabinet. And then at the base of page 55, we've got some legal comments. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, I know Matthew Willington has said he'd like to come in. Matthew?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Andy, for presenting. I think this is a really important report. I think it brings in the work that's has been done since COVID came in, and I'd like to echo what the leader has said in terms of the thanks to everyone within the health and social care sector in the city. They've all worked extraordinarily hard, and though Gerald's quite right to say that social care was effectively deprioritised by the government at the start of this, I think the tribute has to go to the work that was going on well before we were asked to within the adult social care team at the council, and working with the partners in the private sector and with colleagues in the NHS in this city, that meant we hit the ground running and we weren't, unlike other authorities, left completely in the lurch. But that still didn't stop some of the difficulties, especially the deaths that happened in social care in the city, which were due to, as I say, that being deprioritised from the beginning, which which I know there's an inquiry going on at Parliament, and I'm sure more will be seen of that as and learning points, especially as time goes on. But back to this particular report, this unit has been really, really critical to doing things now. But I asked for this report to come here because this is not just about now, this is about the future as well. This goes right back to Portsmouth Lib Dem's positive plan for change that we had in 2018 when we took back control of the council, and we said we needed a discharge unit in this city. And that's what we want to do now, because we could see even pre May 2018 that was needed for the city. There was all the issues at the QA at the time in terms of discharge. There were lots of difficulty, and this is part of that strategy which goes back all that way, and is really giving us what we need. The really critical thing is about making best use of those resources. Harry Stopnick House is a very large care home. There's a lot of space there. We had our report back in February looking at what the options were, and as it happens, and we didn't know that was going to happen, that within COVID it was the logical place to put this discharge unit, and to make sure that we did as we were asked by the government, as we were told by the government we had to do on the 16th of April. So this is a really important part, not just about during COVID, but a really important part about our long-term strategy for adult social care in the city. We know that the quicker we get people out from hospital when they are fit for discharge, the better the outcomes for people will be. And that's really critical. And I know throughout this, one of the positives about the 3-hour discharge time, which has been brought in, is that, and as long as they are actually medically fit for discharge and not discharged when they hadn't been tested or we didn't know what their test for COVID was. But one of the things that has come out of that has meant that people are going into environments as soon as possible, which aren't a hospital treatment environment, into a rehabilitation, getting people ready either to go home or go back to their care home environment straight away. And that's something that we can really bring to the people of the city who need it through this discharge unit. So I'm really pleased this is here. This is a statement of intent. I'm looking forward to working with colleagues both within the council and outside the council to make sure that we can deliver on this. But it's really important that we get this marker down now, that that's what we want as part of our wider work within the city, to have facilities that the people of this city needs within adult social care. So I completely endorse this report and hope the rest of the Cabinet will join me with
that. Okay. Folks, I haven't got anybody else who's asked to speak. Is everybody okay with the recommendations here from Andy? There are 3 recommendations. Are we okay with all of them, colleagues? Okay, thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Let's move on to item 9, which Felicity is going to introduce. And then item 10 as well. And if you're going to, Felicity, I don't know if you want to do them separately or together. We're in your hands. But can you assume we've read things? Because I'm conscious that time is moving on.
Yep, of course. Hayley is going to introduce the item 9, and then I will follow with the LTP.
Okay. Hayley, then, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So the report sets out the content of the draft Portsmouth Transport Recovery Plan. This has been developed to set the strategic direction for Portsmouth City Council's transport response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Central government have been quite clear to local authorities that we should be providing more space for walking and cycling as residents start to move around the city more, and to support the economic recovery from lockdown. The recovery plan applies the draft vision and objectives of the LTP4 to the current situation, and also those vision and objectives are used to guide our plans for transport over the next 12 months. Members are asked to approve the strategic direction and propose temporary measures as detailed in the draft transport recovery plan. We're also asking for delegated authority for the Assistant Director of Transport to make editorial changes to the document. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very good. Colleagues, Councillor Lynn Stagg.
Thank you, Leader. Can I first of all give my thanks to the officers in the Transport Department, because they have worked their socks off on both this and the LTP4. And I mean that. I mean, they have worked extraordinarily long hours, and it's not been an easy task by any means. The submission that was put in for this recovery plan for transport to DFT was so good. They actually commented on it that it was an excellent submission, that they gave us an extra £25,000, which is really good. So they are supporting what we are doing, even though not all residents necessarily do support some of the measures we've had to take. But one of the reasons why we're supporting is because of the range of schemes we put in. It's not just the one. And I can cover quite a few. I mean, a temporary cycle lane is going to be put in along Elm Grove. We will then assess that, see how well it works, and to see if we can perhaps keep it further in the future. There's filtered permeability, which for those who have no idea what that means, it means preventing through traffic by putting in something like bollards, or in my preference is planters. So you have some greenery involved in the area, and hopefully that local residents will take care of that, or businesses as well. There's a low traffic neighbourhood being put in Milton, and that's 4 roads where, again, filtered permeability in some shape or form to prevent through traffic. So it slows traffic down, enables cyclists and walkers to get through safely, but it also connects up. So you've got East New Road through to Winter Road, east-west, and you've got Goldsmith Avenue and Devonshire Avenue in the south. So it's connectivity, because one of the things that's sadly lacking in the city, and we're working on it, it's not going to be an instant answer by any means, and this comes into LTP4, is the fact that cycle lanes often are not good enough. They're not wide enough, they're not safe enough, but also they don't necessarily connect up. They'll go for a short distance and stop, and you come into competing with traffic, and that's something we want to address. So there's that, and then there's a real allocating road space, and this is at the direction of the Secretary of State for Transport, Grant Shapps, who said we must, and this is a direction, it was not a suggestion, we were told we had to do it, is to reallocate road space. And one of the places which the police asked us to do was to close the Seafront Road. This has been very controversial, and first to admit it. It has had knock-on effects. We've tried to address those as best we can, but there's one thing we can't address, and that is people coming in when they've been told not to. So it's a real difficulty, when the government instruction is not to travel, particularly to places like the seafront, and people totally ignore it and come from Essex, Birmingham, London, and come down and ignore that instruction. it's not easy to control. So that is a difficult one. But there are other difficulties well within the city. As you all know, it's an island. We have 3 roads on and off the island. Trying to do things like widen pavements is very difficult when you've only got room for 2 very narrow lanes. So it's not easy to do. These are problems that the officers have had to contend with. So I would recommend this. I commend what they've suggested to do. And a lot of the things as well are going to be carried on. This is only out of tranche 1 of the money that's come from the DFG. Tranche 2 money, I think we've recently, I think it was yesterday, we heard that we were awarded. It's just under 900,000, I believe, isn't it? Something like that. So there are other schemes as well, which we're going to, and those will become more permanent. So there's a lot more work for them to do. So they're going to have long hours yet again. So many thanks in advance. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. And I'd like to echo your thoughts. I think it's been interesting to see some of the work that's gone on. I think we all recognise that we live in a very constrained city where there's very little room, roads are not wide, and we don't have space often to extend pavements. But I think some of the decisions that have been come up with in terms of prioritising cycling and prioritising walking have been good. And I'm sure people will continue with that. So my thanks for that. So I haven't got anybody else who has said they want to speak on this. So colleagues, are you happy with the 5 recommendations here on report number 9? Thank you very much indeed. And then we go to item number 10, which is the local transport plan, which is Felicity.
Thank you very much. So I'm pleased to bring back to Cabinet today an update on the LTP4. Since the approval of the draft vision and objectives back in Cabinet in March, we've undertaken a considerable amount of work, which has included a number of internal and external workshops. So we've built in that early feedback into the draft document that you have today. We have revised the draft vision to make it more user-friendly and readable, which is contained within section 3.4 of your report. The 4 objectives that were presented back in March remain the same, which is to deliver cleaner air, prioritise walking and cycling, transform public transport and support businesses and protect our assets. 20 policies have also been developed which support the 4 objectives, which are also included in section 5 of the LTP document. The next steps will be to design the document so it's much more user-friendly and readable. So we'll be doing that over the coming months so that we're ready to launch a consultation in September. That will be a 12-week public consultation, and therefore the recommendations of this paper to Cabinet is to approve the content of the draft LTP4 strategy ready for consultation. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lynn Stagg, would you like to add to anything to that, Lynn?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Leader. One thing I want to say is that work for this has been going on for well over 12 months. This is not in any knee-jerk response to any petitions being carried out in the city. It's been ongoing and it's been building up because it's layer after layer. It's not just one thing. There's lots of things involved. And if you look at the what we now call the sunray diagram, we have 2 of those. We have the one that's for the recovery plan, and the other one which is for the transport strategy, integrated transport strategy for the city to last us up to 2036. I mean, it will change, it will develop, it will grow from there. It won't be static, but it's there. It's a long-term plan, and that has been there from the word go. We've been working on that now for, well, as I say, well over 12 months. And the final thing, I think, well, that's not the final thing, but the latest thing, which is going to be launched tomorrow, and I must mention this because I find it very exciting. There's a website, but it's a website within the council's website, and it's called Travel Portsmouth, and it's got all the various things that are happening within transport for the city. It's linked completely with the LTP4, with the LC, with the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. It's also got an interactive map, which I think is absolutely brilliant. So it's not complete by any means. It's sort of embryonic. There's a lot more stuff to add to it, and stuff will be added to it as the months go by. But have a look at it, because it is highlighting how you can get from A to B or C to D or wherever using cycle routes with buses, the bus transport. And also it's got things like the new cycle repair stands. There are 9 of them will be put into the city so that people can go, and because it's expensive very often to go and have your bike repaired. So for people short of money, and let's face it, people are short of money, particularly after the lockdown we've had. So they're there in 9 locations in the city, and we're hoping some more. If some of the councillors in other parts of the city let us know where a good place would be to put them, we'll put them in. So it's totally interactive, and it's the strap line is that we're moving towards a cleaner, greener and better connected city, because it's not just, there's not isolated little bits and pieces, everything is connected up. So you need to be able to get from A to B, maybe 2 different modes of transport. Maybe you cycle, maybe you walk, and then you catch a bus, and then maybe have a train, and you have facilities there to store a bike or such like. But it shows you at a glance, and there'll be apps as well that you can download. So it's totally integrated. And again, many congratulations to the officers who've been absolutely brilliant in bringing this all together. And to Claire Jennings, I think, and her team who brought together this Travel Portsmouth map. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Matthew Winnington.
Thank you, Felicity, for introducing, and again to everyone who's put this together. I think this is one of the most important documents we have when we consider everything really about the city. Obviously, with my portfolio hat on, we're talking about public health. And this is absolutely critical to the public health and well-being of everyone in the city, that we get this right. I'm really pleased this is going out for consultation, and I encourage everyone to get involved in that consultation. We already have documents out there that are fed into this and can feed off it, like City to Share, that I was at the launch of from the Portsmouth Cycle Forum, I think it was 6 years ago now, and 5 or 6 years ago. And that's something that's really fed into this, but it's also a good marker for us to remember that things have been there for a while that we can really mark ourselves against, and we shouldn't get complacent in that. We've also got some of the walking strategy stuff that Portsmouth Friends of the Earth have done as well, and we've also got the connected LC whip, which is obviously part of this LTP4 plan, and if you look into that, is one that will be renewed within twice. So there will be 3 LC whips within the course.
Matthew, could you translate LC whip into English?
Local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. So that's something that every council has to do. And it's obviously really important that we make the most of our extremely flat city, other than our one hill, which Simon, of course, is very well aware of, as he represents a third of it, and it's just made for that. Though, as others have said, we do have our ongoing issues of being a very, very densely populated city, but this is critical, as I say, to the health and well-being of everyone in this city. If we get this right, we are going to have not only quieter streets and healthier streets and cleaner air, but we're also going to have healthier people who are happier, people who feel safer when they're out walking and cycling, and that will be a good thing. But we owe it to the people of the city not to rest on our laurels. We owe it to challenge, to make sure that we support officers to deliver as quickly as possible, but we also that we also make sure that we get that feedback from the public. So my call out to people is get involved with this consultation, get involved in what you want to see. This is a once in a generation opportunity to get this right. We've learned a lot through the COVID crisis. We've learned a lot through what we've done in our recovery planning, but we need to make this stick. So I hope everyone from all parties and all parts of our city can get together behind this and support this plan.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, colleagues.
Can I add one more thing?
Of course you can, Lynn.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant to say this is not the end product.
No.
This is just the start, and it's all going to be added to, and it will evolve. And Simon Bosher just put in a point, and I think what he needs, and I think you need to take this on board, Felicity, I think he needs a cycle lift up Portsdown Hill, because he said cycling up the hill is very difficult. So we'll see if we can build that into our finances. Okay, thank you.
Okay, colleagues, many thanks, and Simon, we're not buying you an electric scooter. So colleagues, the recommendation is that we go out and do this statutory consultation. Are you happy with that, colleagues? Okay, I don't hear anybody against. Thank you very much indeed. Can we now move on to item 11, the waste collection and disposal infrastructure item, which Colette Hill is going to introduce.
Thank you, Leader. So this is an information-only report to update the Cabinet on the future of waste collections and the disposal infrastructure. As you'll be aware, the administration declared a climate emergency in March 2019, and part of the strategy for dealing with this is linked to waste management. We've already taken action to improve recycling with the introduction of carton bring banks across the city and a weekly food waste collection trial, which is underway. Plans are being developed to provide more food waste collections to increase the amount of food waste collected, with further trials starting this September. Also to deliver waste collections in the future in a more green collection fleet, looking at electrical hydrogen options, and also to provide an anaerobic digestion plant to treat the food waste from Portsmouth and Hampshire, generating green energy. Section 3.3 covers the collection options and highlights the progress of the food waste trial, with almost 50% of food waste being collected from the trial area. Sections 3.4 also mentions covers the future of the vehicle fleet and what we're considering going forward. Sections 3.5 and 3.6 cover the provision of an anaerobic digestion plant to deal with the food waste that we collect in the future, and also a new material, the replacement of the existing materials recovery facilities, which are the sorting centres for recycling materials, to expand the range of materials that we can get residents to put into the curbside recycling bins. 3.7 references the government's environment bill, which is progressing through the parliamentary process at the moment, and this covers a number of areas, including consistent collections across all local authorities, a deposit return scheme which could apply to bottles and glass and plastic bottles and steel and aluminium drinks cans, and extended producer responsibility, which is expected to be the mechanism by which funding is provided for additional burdens, so services we don't currently provide. Section 4 lists the work that's already underway, so all of those projects, and with some guidelines in terms of timescales, although they could be impacted by the current situation. Happy to take questions.
Okay, Councillor Dave Ashmore.
Thank you. Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes, David. Leap in.
Leap in. No, thanks for that, Colette. And another thing that we should be thankful to all the officers who have put hard work in this. It's an information-only report, but it's a narrative, really, isn't it? It shows Portsmouth's continual improvement under this Liberal Democrat administration. You know, we know that the recycling rate wasn't as good as it could have been. We've added things like Tetra Paks, bring banks around the city, but we didn't want to stop there. So now we've added food waste trials to the areas to see how that went. And I think, as Colette said there, 50% of the food waste collected is now being used for something. You know, and we don't want to stop there. So now we're going to roll that out to the entire city by the end of next year. You know, and we don't want to stop there. So we've considered an anaerobic digester in the area there that we can have, you know, to use it to provide things like biogas and provide things that could feed into a later circular economy. You know, and that was in our greenest ever budget that we passed at full council. And now we're talking about the fleet that we use, the vehicle fleet. So we don't want to stop there either. We want to see that be a more green fleet that we can use there, running on renewable energy. You know, so yeah, it's basically a good a narrative we've got there, some good information. And yeah, I just add my thanks to the officers who have been working extremely hard with us on that. So yeah, all good and positive.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Colette. I'd like to add my thanks. I think this is really good stuff. If we, when we get to the point of collecting food waste from every single house in the city, that will be really, really good. I'm struck that there are only 2 councils in Hampshire that do food waste recycling, ourselves and Eastleigh, both of which have Lib Dem administrations. No Labour council in Hampshire, no Conservative council in Hampshire does food waste recycling in the same way. But I do hope that everybody else catches up with what we are doing. We're looking as well at providing an anaerobic digester, not just for ourselves, but for the whole of Hampshire. We could be waiting on the government's environment bill, but that means waiting for 3 years longer than we need to. And I'm pleased that we've decided to go ahead and get this done now. But other councils will, I hope, catch up with us. And that means that we'll have capacity, we hope, in the anaerobic digester to support not just Portsmouth's waste, but also for the whole of Hampshire, but also maybe for the Isle of Wight and West Sussex as well. So that means that the gas produced can be pumped back into the main. So when you turn your cooker on, you'll be cooking on gas produced from rubbish and not from a fossil fuel. And that's very good in terms of our carbon footprint as a city. So thanks very much indeed for this. I'm looking forward to having a group of dust carts going around the city, either powered by electricity or by hydrogen. We all have to take our bits of responsibility. I'm in the process of buying a plug-in hybrid car so that we can charge our car off the solar panels on our roof, so that again we reduce the carbon footprint of the city. So colleagues, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, I know this is just an information item, but I thought it's really important to come here, and big impact on people's lives in the city. Are you happy with that? Thank you very much indeed. Let's move along. Item 13, COVID recovery. This is David Williams and Paddy May. David, do you want to launch in?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much. The report sets out the City Council's response and the city's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Clearly, this has been a hugely traumatic time for all. And the report just sets out where some of those impacts will hit most hard, and just talks about the opportunity for reflection in terms of how we respond to that. Clearly, we're dealing with a very dynamic situation. It's changing by the day, sometimes by the hour. We've seen a phenomenal response both by the city and by the City Council to the challenges that we faced, but we do know that the impact will be greater for those most vulnerable, both in terms of adults and also in terms of children, young people and their futures. At the moment, the city might not feel like it, but we have a relatively low infection rate, in fact, one of the lowest infection rates of any city in the country. It's really important that we keep it that way. And one of the things that we're guarding against is any complacency. And I think whilst you've heard a huge amount about how services have been operating during the course of COVID through this meeting, I think it's also worth remembering how much impact our communications team and our ability to get good, clear messaging out to the public at a time when perhaps that hasn't been universally available through the central government. So a huge effort by staff and by partners, and I think the City Council should be really proud because the investment it has put in on the years preceding the COVID pandemic in terms of partnership working has helped the city respond really effectively to this terrible situation. Most of our services are now back up and running. There are some backlogs in some areas, inevitably. It's been a 4-month period. And also in some areas, we've redesigned how we deliver our services and will continue to do so. Financial impact is touched on in the report. That will be an ongoing debate both between ourselves and central government and within the City Council, I'm sure, for some time to come. Before we went into the pandemic, we were working with partners and with the communities across the city in terms of developing and refreshing the vision for the city and the expression of the values of the city. I'm pleased to say that that work is now continuing. It's now back on track, and I'm sure that it will inform and be informed by the work that the City Council has been doing. So we're progressing that work. We've got a huge engagement and great support from all of our partners on that, and we've got a very engaged cross-section of the community who are keen to continue to be involved in that work. So despite the tragedy of the crisis, there's a huge amount of positive activity that is coming out of this, and I think it gives us a good platform from which to reflect in terms of how we move forward from this and how we don't just repair our city, but we really take our city forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, David. Councillor Steve Pitt, would you like to come in?
Yes, happy to, Leader. Thank you. I'm not going to go over all the ground that David's just covered in the interest of time, but just to add my eternal gratitude to the Office of Portsmouth City Council, who have gone above and beyond to make sure that we did everything possible to protect Portsmouth during this unprecedented crisis. That word gets used every day now, but at the beginning of this, it really did feel like it, and it still does most days. Staff have gone away from doing their normal roles and responsibilities in many instances and gone to support other colleagues, not just within the council, but externally as well. And that's all of that effort, the work with businesses, community and care and health workers across the city is why Portsmouth's in a pretty good position compared, sadly, to other authorities. It is, however, important that we do remember that people have been lost along the way and that families have suffered those bereavements, and they are going to need our support in recovering each and every family across the city and each and every community to make sure that we take Portsmouth together. Okay, I did want to, however, touch on a few bits and pieces in my economic development role that I think are worthy of particular note and drawing out from the report. And the first one is the work that's happened by the economic development team, overseen by Ian Maguire but led by Mark Pembleton. They have also drawn in other members of staff as well from the skills team with Jane Lemaire, and they formed a group very early on. Portsmouth City Council was responding to an unprecedented situation in that almost every other crisis management scenario would be relatively short term. You would expect, in the event of fire or flood or, God forbid, a terrorist attack, that you would have a quick response, you'd deal with the situation, and then you would go into recovery. That's not been the nature here. So we've had to change things along the way, and one of the things we changed was to recognise that actually economic development was going to be a business critical service, and we got it stood back up very quickly, got a dedicated helpline in place, and pulled that team of staff together. I am eternally grateful for the work they've done, because what they didn't do was just tick a box. They were passionate about what they were doing. They put together a service that was stood up from Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. in the morning until 7 o'clock at night, making sure there was always somebody on the end of that phone to support local businesses. And we've got to remember that by that we just don't mean commercial businesses, we also mean the voluntary and community sector, social enterprises, charities in the city who needed desperately to know what was the right information for them to be accessing and what was the correct support for them to be applying for along the lines of the government grants that were being put in place, all of which happened, and it's easy to forget this now, it happened extremely quickly and with very little information to go with it with each announcement, constantly having to play catch up, but constantly refining those processes. The feedback the team has had has been outstanding. And I think the one thing we can be particularly proud of as a city is that that work was then picked up by other local authorities in Hampshire and by the LEP and taken forward as best practice. So to Mark Pembleton and all of that team that came together to support that, thank you, thank you, thank you. And a particular thank you to Matt Willis, who's literally minute by minute responses to every question that I was throwing at him and that team were throwing at him. Again, that's been outstanding, and I have recorded my thanks to them on a couple of occasions, but it's great to have the opportunity to do that publicly. So that was the first piece of work they had to do, was to get the information out, get the business grants out there. The next thing they had to do was support the reopening of the high street, and they did that with some enthusiasm as well, getting out there actually into Commercial Road and our other shopping centres, giving advice to those businesses where necessary, getting them the kit they needed or telling them where they could get hold of it so that they could be COVID safe when they got themselves going again. And then that's had to move on to rebooting the hospitality sector as well. So those officers have had to continue to respond and step up to do something which is not even part of their normal day-to-day job remit, and pull together as a team, and they've done an outstanding job in doing it. We all know that although the funding that was put in place, the business grant funding, has helped an awful lot of people, and the government are to be commended for the significant number of people who have benefited from it, there were also people falling through the cracks. So one of the other things we did with our partners at Shaping Portsmouth very early on was to redirect the crowdfunder scheme to support those businesses who could not access any other government support. So there are now businesses stood up today in Portsmouth still trading and employing people who absolutely definitely would not be had we not taken that decision. So again, thank you to Mark and the team, and thank you to our partners in Shaping Portsmouth who made sure that we were able to support those businesses to get that help. And I just wanted to particularly mention one particular scheme which I took to Portsmouth Creates and said, guys, could you possibly lead on this? I think it would really help our local creatives. And they picked it up and ran with it, and that was to support 20 micro commissions for independent artists in the city who hadn't had any other support, and that will now become an outside arts trail in the city, and each one of those 20 artists will receive £500 because we don't ask creatives to give up their creativity and their work for free, and nor should we. Moving on to Shaping Portsmouth Future Together, it's really important that as a council we are not arrogant in believing that we have all the solutions about how we fully embed a recovery in our city. And therefore, when Steph and the Shaping team stood up and said, we're here to help, what should we do? Let's have a conversation. Let's lead on this. The City Council was delighted to join with them on that work and make sure that all agencies, I mean, Matt, for example, Councillor Winnington, said, let's get the care homes and get the care sector involved. And they've joined that work stream. We've got Hampshire Chamber of Commerce in there. We're linked in with the local resilience forum and that recovery work. So Mark Pembleton joins me on those calls, but so does the Director of Education, Mike Stoneman, because this is not just about business, it's about supporting skills development and making sure that those young people who have lost a long period of their education this year, which is incredibly valuable to them, are not digitally excluded. And I'm very proud that those work streams are now starting to happen. So they're based on the following focuses. They're based on initial support to businesses reopening and reshaping themselves, and that's linked in with the council's Go Shop, Go Eat, Go Safe, Go Local campaign, which I'm delighted to report as of today is now being adopted by other local councils in the area because they can see what a great campaign it is and how well it's been put together. We've got businesses working to support our schools around digital exclusion because we need to make sure that we don't have young people in the city who don't have access to digital devices. So this is not just about helping business, but about business helping education as well. We have looked at another piece of work to make sure that Our voluntary and community sector, which has been significantly impacted, is able to stand back up, and we ensure resilience for it and support for it wherever we possibly can. And that brings me, of course, to mention of the Hive, who at the start of the pandemic were a nascent organisation beginning to find their feet in a role, but they threw themselves with a massive enthusiasm into being the hub and the spokesperson or spokes organisation for the sector, and they have done that in an absolutely outstanding way. We know from the reports that we get from other local authorities around the country that there are very few places who are able to say that no one who needed food went without it. That's got nothing to do with the government's shielding programme, which was also fantastic, but we went further and we said, as a council, we are going to support food purchases to replenish the food banks and make sure that people do not go without. No other local authority has been able to give that universal guarantee, and we should all be very proud of it. Sorry, I've got a bit of a sore throat and it keeps cracking up on me today. The other part of this that was so important for the Hive was to make sure that prescription deliveries were happening. So they got a prescription service going. People may have seen on television the awful scenes in Blandford Forum where the queue was all the way around the block because there was no prescription delivery service. And the Hive picked up on that straight away and made that happen. They also got things like dog walking and gardening support for those who were shielding, and then develop and will continue to develop a locality network. All of that is so important, and they are businesses too, but they are businesses who are making sure that the welfare of our residents is an absolute priority, and those two things should never be separated again. We must not allow that to happen. Oh, sorry, we must not allow that to happen, and we need to make sure that we keep that seamless working. And I'm delighted to report to everyone that the cross-party committee that looks at the work that the Hive's doing has endorsed that approach, and all parties in Portsmouth City Council are saying that we have to make sure that those steps forward that have been taken must not be retreated from now. Wrapping around all of that work that's happening with Shaping and the Hive and Future Together is well-being, and it's important to note that we've got Gordon Mavuti working with us on this going forward, who's the Director of Partnerships for Solent NHS Trust, and he's already proving to be extremely valuable with his contributions because it's about well-being as well as it's about economic regeneration. Couple of quick points to touch on, Leader, and then I'll finish. Emerging City Vision. We are aligning our direction of travel, but as businesses, as voluntary and community sector, as community, as individual residents, as educators, all of us need to be aligned moving forward with a common direction of travel so that as we develop policies and strategies in the years to come, we are talking to each other, understanding what our competing priorities are, but also where our synergies are to make sure that we have a coherent vision to deliver for Portsmouth over the next 20 years. So that vision work is still happening and it's very important. Notably, it's revisited conversations with the consultees around the impact of COVID-19 so that it is not already out of date when it comes forward, and it does reflect the current situation. And I'd like to particularly thank the university, the naval base, all our local businesses, the voluntary sector, and the members of the local community have focused on this and given up their time and have an ongoing commitment to do so. It will be important that at the end of it, the council is able to review our own priorities and make sure that what we are doing and moving forward properly reflects what the people of our city expect us to do, because that's our job. And finally, I just wanted to pay reference to the excuse me, to the £20 million black hole in our finances that you referred to at the beginning. In order for this council to be the prime mover in regeneration in our city, in working with other development partners and making sure that we attract every single penny of investment that we can, this council needs to be resilient. So we welcome the initial 12 million that we receive from local government. We look forward to some clarity around what share of the next 500 million we will get and what the formula for supporting lost income will mean. But the government has moved from their initial position in saying just spend the money, we need to get this done, to saying there will be some shared financial pain. So we now know that the gap is not going to be fully closed, and we need to continue to strongly make the case to government that if you want councils to be leading actors in the process of recovery, then you need to make sure we're properly resourced. And that's why we will be asking the members of all parties in the city to support the future High Street bid when it goes in, and asking our MPs, as they did at the initial stage, to also renew their support, because our high streets in particular are going to need investment. And on a final note, and nobody would expect me to say otherwise, I'm delighted to report that Portsmouth Creates are working with Shaping to make sure that our creative and cultural industries are not left behind. Thank you, Leader, and sorry for the crackly voice today.
Thank you, colleagues. I haven't got anybody else who's asked to come in. Colleagues, are you happy with that? Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, we've been going for just 2 hours now. I'm speaking at another a conference at 2:15, so if we don't manage to finish the rest of it in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to need to hand over to Steve to carry the meeting on. Okay, let's go on to item 14, and Steve's spoken about this just now. So item 14 is the financial impact of COVID. Chris, anything you'd like to add to the report?
Just to thank the Deputy Leader for the introduction to the report. Thank you very much, Councillor Pitt. I thought it was excellent, and I couldn't endorse it further than that. One thing I think to highlight in the report really, which is that the key recommendation in the report is to adopt the financial strategy to deal with the £20 million shortfall. That's set out in the body of the report. In part, it suggests earmarking £5 million from the Council's corporate contingency. It also suggests earmarking £5 million from one of the Council's earmarked reserves for spend to save initiatives, and then it seeks to find the balance by placing certain capital schemes on hold, not necessarily cancellation, but on hold until such time as the overall financial position is known with much greater clarity. We are expecting to hear what the outcome of the latest funding package from government is this week. We were expecting to hear about it last week, actually. We still haven't heard at this stage, but we are hopeful that we'll hear more about that later this week, and it'll give us a bit more understanding of what the overall shortfall for the council looks like. But nothing further than that, Leader. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, thanks so much indeed for this, and this will be an ongoing piece of work which we'll need to bring to all councillors to make sure that we've got everybody's agreement to this. But I think we need to be clear, A, that the government initially said they would fund everything and they're not, but also the size of the problem. If colleagues remember the budget last year, we had to find £1 million of savings. This is 20 times as big, and to do it in a year is going to be very difficult, and it's going to mean some very, very difficult decisions. But we'll keep working on this. Colleagues, are you happy with this strategy? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Moving on to the Municipal Bonds Agency.
Leader, sorry, I just think it's very important to stress that as an administration, we have made it very clear that our absolute priority is to protect council services. Absolutely. And that we will look everywhere else for the savings before we go there.
Yeah, but we'll have to make sure that we get the books to balance. We have to be financially responsible in this, and we will work very, very hard to make sure that we do that and protect services. Okay, Municipal Bonds Agency, Chris.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks your approval to enter into an arrangement with the Municipal Bonds Agency, which will enable the council to participate in a bond issuance to the market. So it gives the council another source of lending. You'll probably recall that a few years back the council invested in the Municipal Bonds Agency, and the real objectives that sat behind that were to increase the council's options for any borrowing. Secondly, to reduce the reliance on the Public Works Loans Board, which is the majority financier of the council in terms of any of its borrowing. And that's mainly because they have a tendency to vary the rates up and down quite frequently. So it would provide a degree of immunization from that respect. And also to potentially benefit from longer term interest rates. It does involve the council signing up to an agreement that effectively underwrites or guarantees any default from any other local authority that participates in a bond issuance. But as you know, local authorities are relatively pretty secure, often have support from central government, and any underwriting by this authority would be limited on a proportionate basis in accordance with all of the other participants in the scheme. Any questions?
Colleagues, any questions on this? Personally, I think it's the sensible thing to do on the basis that it keeps pressure down on the interest rates of money we borrow, and therefore it means council taxpayers have to pay less, and that's a good thing. Councillor Hugh Mason.
Thank you, Leader. I think there are three things here. One, this just shows the resilience and the strength of the local authorities coming together through the LGA to set up this municipal bonds agency. Secondly, I think it is important that we have a means of challenging the peculiar interest rates charged by the Public Works Loans Board. If we can do something better, we can then get the Public Works Loans Board, I think, to become much more sane and much more competitive than it has been over recent years. And thirdly, I think it is important to underline the fact that our liability is limited to the proportion of the total non-defaulting loans equal to our council's total borrowing. I think that the setup is one which gives us considerable defence against any rogue councils. Not that there are very many of them. But it also gives us a good handle on means by which we can fund the types of developments which Councillor Pitt has been talking about and which come under my remit, that we will have to do in the forthcoming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Anybody else? Colleagues, are you happy with the recommendations A and B? Okay, thank you. We now move on to looking at the board composition of companies that the council owns. There's a recommendation here from the officers that we go into closed session. I don't understand why we would do that. These are companies that are going to be owned or are owned by the council, and therefore they're owned by the public. And I think we need to make sure that we have as much openness and transparency about that as possible. Is Peter Bolf on the call? Because it'd be his recommendation that we go into private session, which I'm not sure I agree with. Peter, are you there? There is no Peter, it would appear.
Chair, I think the city solicitor's on call if needed. I think the resolution is just that you keep that information exempt, that confidential appendix, but you are more than welcome to stay in open session if you do not refer to the information in that appendix.
Okay, but I'm not sure I understand why that appendix is confidential. David Williams as Chief Executive. Is
yes,
David?
Leader.
David?
I'm here. Yeah. The city solicitor's advice is that appendix should be kept. Here he comes. He's on.
Peter.
Sorry, Gerald. I was just darting around from the report to the screen back to the directors' meeting. I now realise I'm not in because David's in this one, obviously. So that gives me a big clue. The reason the report is exempt is because it's solicitor and own client advice that we obtained from Bevan Britton on a confidential basis. The genesis of that advice is contained within the report. I'm not happy to disclose privileged information to the wider public. It makes no particular difference to you, but it does to me on the basis that's how we've structured it. That was the logic.
If this is advice to the council to say that we should structure things in a particular way, that's what we're doing. What's the problem in allowing the advice to be seen as well? Because then we're following the advice.
Yeah, well, I think that the trouble with it is, if that advice goes into the public and you are not as stringently observing of that advice, somebody will trot it out against you at a later stage saying, look, not only did you have the City Solicitor's recommendation within an open report, but you also had privileged information from Bevan Britton that you disclosed, and you've not followed it or behaved according to it. It's a bit of an insurance.
We are following.
Yes, I appreciate you are, but I'm saying this is a higher bar for you to have to obtain. And the report you have in front of you is a much more anodyne and much more sensible set of behaviours that one would expect company directors to perform against.
Okay, I'm remain unconvinced.
To waive your exemption and waive your... Sorry?
I remain unconvinced.
You might remain unconvinced, but that's my opinion. You're welcome to it, Gerald, but you can reject it as any client can. It's a matter entirely for you and your colleagues.
Okay, folks, do you want to keep the appendix confidential or not? It's a simple view. What's everybody's thought? Steve?
Yeah, I think we should retain it as a confidential appendix. It's not, the bit that's the relevant part of this is the structure that we're taking out to the public to tell them how we are going to employ governance in companies that we have either a stake in or ownership of moving forward. If somebody tells me that I would be better off in my diet if I didn't eat steak pies, that actually has no impact if I don't follow their guidance. However, if somebody has given me a range of guidance to choose from, some of which suggest that I shouldn't eat other favourite sweets, and I do so, I understand that the National Health will take a less than favourable view of me in future, which is one of the reasons, Leader, that I've given up smoking. So I recommend that on this occasion, we take the health advice of the City Solicitor and take the rest of the report in public session as he recommends.
Thank you, Stephen.
Okay,
most helpful.
Folks, are we happy with Steve's suggestion?
Hugh has his hand up, Leader.
Oh, Hugh, sorry, you're behind a bar of various commands.
Okay, it's basically that I think that so long as we don't look at the detail of Appendix A, we should be able to take the whole lot of this in public session. But I would agree with Steve that the detail which is in Appendix A is a type of advice which we should not take in public session.
Okay, I'll be beaten down. Colleagues, do I gather that you would like to move into session just in relation to Appendix A of this report, but we will keep having the meeting in open session? Are you okay with that? Thank you. Okay. Chris, have you got anything else that you'd like to add? Or no, it's not Chris, it's Peter. Anything you'd like to add to the report?
Nothing more, Leader. It's a very sensible piece of general advice on how you should act in terms of company structures. Frankly, it's a very good bedrock for moving forward and things we do in the future, actually.
Good. And I hope we'll be appointing non-execs from outside the council soon. Matthew, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Gerald. I'd just like to, I'm really pleased that this report has come forward. This is well overdue for us to have independent non-execs for council-owned companies. It's something that I've been pushing for a good 4 or 5 years. And I think this will only make them stronger companies, more accountable, and will give us the challenge, and we will be able to challenge the companies better with these kind of structures in place. So I'm absolutely behind this report, and I'm really pleased that we've again brought something we've been pushing for when we were in opposition, and we're managing to bring it to reality as the administration of the council. Okay,
Councillor Steve Pitt.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be very quick. We've got a bit of a crackly line here. I just wanted to place on the record that we should also thank Sophie Mallon, who's put a lot of work into this with other members of the legal team in supporting Peter to bring this forward. So thank you to Sophie.
Okay,
thank you, Stephen.
And finally, I think the council would have been much better served with a system like this with Victory Energy, because there would have been some external view over what was happening, some independent view, and as opposed to things being done in secret. And I think this openness and transparency is where we need to be. So, colleagues, thank you very much indeed. I need to be chairing another meeting in 1 minute. Can I therefore declare this meeting closed? Thank everybody for being on, and thank you very much indeed, everybody. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald.
Thank you. Bye now.
Right.